And so France is on the verge of civil war. And at the same time, France has to deal with fighting the Austrians and the Prussians who get involved in the war as well. And at the same time, there's this fear about counter-revolutionary activity everywhere amongst these refractory clergy, peasants, the nobles that are saying, you guys are winning now, but don't worry, everything you're doing will be rejected, and you guys are going to all get executed, right? Because you've done these things. So there's all this counter-revolutionary fear, or fear of counter-revolutionaries, and so it's in that environment that the National Convention gives a lot of power to this governing group that is known as the Committee of Public Safety. The Committee of Public Safety will be put in charge in order to manage the French country amidst the war while the National Convention writes a new constitution. So the Committee of Public Safety will be managing, governing the country, fighting this war while a new constitution is written. Now, therefore, in order to hold things together, the Committee of Public Safety decides to have a reign of terror. Okay, it says it decides to use terror in order to get people to follow its leadership. And so, basically, the reign of terror sees the use of the guillotine as well as other methods in order to kill people that are accused of counter-revolutionary activities. And the people that are killed in the reign of terror span every group. There are nobles that are killed, there are peasants that are killed, there are clergy that are killed, there are sans-culottes that are viewed as too radical, too extreme, demanding too much reforms. They are killed as well. And so there's people from, and of course there's bourgeoisie people that oppose the government economic restrictions. They're killed as well. And including Olympe de Gouges, who earlier was issuing the, who issued the Declaration of Rights of Women. She's killed in the Reign of Terror. And Condorcet, one of our philosophes of the Enlightenment, he wrote about sort of this new age of reason, sort of contributed to the encyclopedia. And so I think in our salon, one of you or someone was Condorcet. He's also executed in the Reign of Terror. So it spans a lot of people. And also another radical thing that the National Convention does is Dechristianization. And so it renames streets that were named after saints. It also changes churches, changes the interiors of churches. For example, the Cathedral of Notre Dame becomes a temple of reason, and later the temple to the Supreme Being. And that temple to the Supreme Being is sort of this deistic God, not Christian, with all these with the revelation of the Christian Bible or the traditions of the Christian Catholic Church hierarchy, but instead a deistic God that's created everything that will be worshipped inside the building. So Dechristianization is also another example of sort of more radical steps that we've taken. And then the levee en masse is declared. Basically, this is a conscription. This is a draft of all able-bodied men who are in the age group, which is something like, 16 or 18 to 30 or 40. It's sort of like everyone is drafted in the war that can't serve. Now, this leads to success on the battlefield, but a lot of opposition to the policies of the terror and Dechristianization in France. Sabrina, question.
It's kind of off topic, but can you explain what a coup is?
When we get to coup, I'll explain it. So, there's a lot of reaction against the radical excesses of the National Convention and the Committee of Public Safety. And basically, the Committee of Public Safety people within the National Convention begin to fear it. And so there becomes a lot of resistance to Robespierre and the Committee of Public Safety. And so finally, a majority within the National Convention decide to shout down Robespierre, and they vote to arrest him, and arrest him for treason against the state. And so Robespierre is eventually executed. But before this, many other revolutionaries had been executed because they had disagreed with Robespierre and the Committee of Public Safety's edicts and ideas. So in the aftermath of Robespierre's execution, the Committee of Public Safety is ended, and this begins a new phase, which is known as the Thermidorian reaction. It's known as Thermidor because that's the month. Remember, one of the radical changes was a new calendar. And so Thermidor is the month in which this change will happen, and the shift from the Reign of Terror to then the post-Committee of Public Safety France. So the Thermidorian reaction basically rejects the radical extremes of the radical phase. It ends the restrictions on prices. It ends the dechristianization. It ends the ideas about creating this society of virtue. For example, during the radical phase, people started wearing Roman outfits and calling each other not sir or madame, but what's the French equivalent of comrade? I forget. It might be comrade. Something along these lines, right? So new titles to signal this new era. So anyway, and this new reactionary phase will be a reaction against the radical phase, and so they're going to create a new government known as the Directory. And the Directory will be a group of 5 people that will manage the government, and then the Directory will have a legislative branch in which people will vote for electors, and then those electors will vote the representatives to the legislative branch. And so there's not going to be direct elections. And that is, of course, a sign that they don't want these sort of excessive, radical things that mass democracy might bring about. Now the Directory, because there's 5 different people in charge of the executive branch, plus a lot of resistance to the legislative branch, and what many people perceive as a restoration of bourgeois power over society. So as a result of this, there's going to be a lot of resistance to the Directory, and it will be weak. And there's going to be attempts from the left to take over. For example, there's a group called the Hébertists, led by a radical named Hébert, or Herbert. And he will, try to overthrow the Directory and have another republic declared, like in the good old days of the radical phase. Whereas, and then there's going to be problems. Napoleon will move into Paris, for example. He's the leader of this army. We'll know about him later. And, he'll like crush the sans-culottes that are opposing this new government. So he uses force there. But the new government is pretty weak. And so Napoleon will, some of the politicians in the government will not like it, including Abbé Sieyès, who was involved when this whole thing got involved. And so they'll actually invite Napoleon to come back and seize control. So Napoleon, who is a very popular war general because of his victory over the Austrians, will actually come back from Egypt, where he's fighting against the British, and he will then take control of the country. And this will be the coup d'etat of 1799. Now, a coup means a swift stroke. A coup d'etat means a swift stroke of state. In other words, a swift change in the leadership of a state. Okay? A coup d'etat, a swift stroke or change in the leadership of a state.